When I stepped out of the cab that July afternoon, the air felt heavier than I remembered. The sky hung low over the quiet suburb of Brookpine, a small, forgettable town somewhere between where I'd been and where I was going. Ryan Wells lived at the edge of it, in a weathered two-story house that looked untouched by time. It was the kind of place where the silence had weight, and where even the birds seemed to fly a little slower. I was 19, caught in the strange space between the end of high school and the unknown stretch of whatever came next. My parents said this summer would help me clear my head. They didn't say much else, only that Ryan, an old family friend they trusted, had offered to let me stay with him until the fall semester began. I hadn't seen him in years, maybe once when I was younger. I barely remembered. The front door opened before I could knock. He stood there, taller than I expected, with tired eyes and a subtle strength in the way he held the frame. His hair was darker now, with a few threads of gray near the temples. He wore a navy button-down, sleeves rolled to the elbows, and his expression was unreadable, calm, reserved. "Luke Bennett," he said, more as a thought than a greeting. "You've grown." I smiled faintly and nodded, unsure what to say. The exchange was brief, polite. He helped me with my single duffel bag and showed me to a small room upstairs. Everything in the house was neat, like no one really lived there. No clutter, no mess. Just space. Space to think, maybe, or space to hide. Over the next few days, I tried to settle into the rhythm of the house. Mornings were quiet. Ryan left early to teach summer classes at the university, his routine exact. He always returned around 4, sometimes later, depending on the traffic or the mood of the day. Evenings passed slowly. We ate dinner in near silence, the television murmuring in the background. I never knew if I was welcome in his quiet or if I was simply an interruption he had learned to tolerate. But there were moments, small, strange moments, when something shifted in the air. I would catch myself watching the way he moved around the kitchen, sleeves pushed up, hands steady as he chopped vegetables or poured a drink. I noticed the curve of his neck as he tilted his head back to drink water from the sink. I noticed too much, and once I noticed, I couldn't unsee. Sometimes he caught my eyes lingering. He never said anything, just glanced, then looked away, as if we were both pretending nothing had passed between us. The days blurred. I read books I didn't finish, took walks I didn't enjoy. But the house itself, it started to shape my thoughts. The soft creak of the stairs, the way the light fell through the blinds in the late afternoon, the scent of old wood and coffee grounds. It became familiar, intimate, in a way I couldn't explain. One evening, Ryan came home later than usual. I heard the front door open, then close softly behind him. He moved through the house like a shadow, quiet and controlled. I stayed in my room, door slightly ajar, listening to his footsteps drift into the kitchen, the soft clink of glass against countertop. I should have closed the door. I didn't. There was no dramatic moment, no sudden spark. Just time, stretching and folding around us in ways I didn't understand. I started to stay up later just to hear him moving downstairs, just to feel that we existed in the same space, even if we never spoke. And in the stillness, my thoughts grew louder. I remembered the first time I truly looked at him, not glanced, not observed, but looked. He had been reading on the back porch, his brow furrowed, a mug in his hand, legs stretched out in the last light of day. His shirt had ridden up slightly, revealing the barest line of skin just above his waistband. It wasn't intentional. It wasn't seductive, but it rooted something in me I couldn't shake. Not then, not now. This wasn't supposed to happen. He was older, smarter, confident in ways I wasn't. He had lived a life already, while I was still figuring out how mine even worked. But something about him, about the way he filled a room without trying, about the silence he carried like armor, it pulled at me. I try not to think about him when I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling fan turning slow circles above me. I try not to imagine the sound of his footsteps stopping outside my door. But the thoughts came anyway, like waves I couldn't stop. I was drawn to him, not because I should be, but because I couldn't help it. And somewhere inside me, I knew this summer wouldn't end the way it was supposed to. It didn't take long for routine to wrap itself around the house like ivy. Every morning, Ryan would move through the kitchen with quiet precision, the sound of the kettle soft against the silence. He always drank his coffee black. No sugar, no milk. I watched the way his fingers curved around the handle of the mug, the way his eyes remained distant, as if they were fixed on something I couldn't see. I usually sat across the room, pretending to scroll through my phone or thumb through one of the books he had left on the shelf for me. Titles I didn't recognize, histories I didn't understand. But his notes were in the margins, small, quick thoughts in sharp handwriting. I read them more carefully than the printed words. He rarely asked questions, and I was grateful for it. I wouldn't have known what to say. We lived like that, together but separate. The days passed in soft repetitions. He left early. I stayed behind. He came back late, carrying the weight of the day on his shoulders like a coat he couldn't remove. We shared dinners, exchanged a few sentences, then drifted again into our respective silences. But with each passing day, something shifted beneath the surface. The smallest things stayed with me longer than they should have. The sound of his footsteps on the stairs. The way his voice dropped when he was tired. The shape of his wrist under a rolled-up sleeve. I began to notice when he was tense, when he had a headache, when he needed space. I learned the rhythm of his silence, and somehow that felt more intimate than words. I started cooking sometimes. It gave me something to do. The first time, I burned the rice. He didn't say anything, just quietly scraped the edges of the pan and finished the meal without complaint. But the next evening, I found a simple recipe left on the counter. No note, just instructions in his handwriting. I made it exactly as written. He didn't compliment it, but he finished every bite. That was his way. I wondered what his life had looked like before I came. If the house had always been this quiet. If he had ever let anyone in. One night, I stayed up late in the living room, wrapped in a blanket, pretending to watch a documentary he'd recommended. He came downstairs just past midnight, half awake, hair tousled, wearing an old t-shirt and sweatpants. He paused when he saw me, then stepped into the kitchen without a word. I heard the fridge open, the sound of a glass being filled. When he returned to the living room, he didn't sit, just stood near the window, sipping water in the dark. I couldn't stop watching him. The way the streetlight framed his silhouette, the way the fabric of his shirt clung to his shoulder blades. I wanted to say something, anything, but the silence was heavy between us, like a secret neither of us had the courage to name. Eventually, he turned toward me. Our eyes met, and in that split second, something unspoken passed between us, something neither of us acknowledged. He gave a slight nod, then disappeared upstairs. I didn't sleep that night. From then on, every moment felt loaded. Every movement carried weight. I would find myself lingering in the hallway when I heard him coming up the stairs. I started choosing clothes more carefully, even though I told myself it didn't matter. I avoided touching him, even accidentally, because I wasn't sure what it would do to me, or to him. And yet, there were times I thought he noticed. His gaze would linger a second too long. His expression would shift, like he was thinking about something he wasn't ready to admit. But maybe it was all in my head. Maybe I was imagining things. I tried to distract myself. I jogged in the mornings, spent hours at the library in town. I even tried writing again, something I hadn't done since I was 16. But no matter what I did, my thoughts circled back to him. Always to him. One afternoon, it rained hard. The kind of rain that made everything slow down. Ryan came home soaked, hair dripping, shirt clinging to his chest. He dropped his keys on the table, muttered something about bad drivers, and disappeared into the bathroom. I stood in the hallway, heart pounding for no reason, listening to the shower run, steam creeping under the door like a living thing. My imagination betrayed me in ways I didn't want to admit. That night, I ate alone. He said he had papers to grade. I sat at the table longer than I needed to, staring at the empty chair across from me. It was getting harder to pretend, harder to push away what was growing inside me. I didn't know what it was exactly, desire, admiration, longing, but it was there, persistent. And every day, it rooted itself deeper. This wasn't just a summer break anymore. This house, this silence, this man, they had become the center of something I didn't yet understand. But I was beginning to realize that understanding wouldn't make it go away. It was a Friday evening when the storm arrived. Not just rain, but a full, bone-rattling storm that made the walls of the house tremble. Thunder cracked across the sky like something tearing apart, and the power flickered once, then disappeared. Darkness fell, sudden and absolute, and for a few moments, I just sat there in the living room, listening to the rain pound the windows like it was trying to get in. Ryan lit a few candles, thick white ones from the hallway closet, and placed them in quiet corners of the room. Their glow painted the walls in soft gold, flickering shadows across the ceiling. He moved through the space like he belonged to it, like the silence was his language. He handed me a blanket without a word, then settled into the armchair across from the couch. I was on the floor, legs crossed, back leaning against the couch. The candlelight made everything feel warmer, closer. I could hear the wind outside, the rustle of leaves, and the occasional crack of lightning, but none of it felt real compared to the quiet between us. He had a book in his lap, open but unread. I could tell he wasn't paying attention. His eyes kept drifting, not quite looking at me, not quite away. Something was different in the way he sat, his shoulders tense, one hand resting near his mouth as if holding back words. I had never seen him like that, unsteady. I wanted to say something, ask a question, make the silence less heavy. But all I could manage was, "Are you okay?" It surprised me, the sound of my own voice. So small, almost swallowed by the storm. He didn't answer right away, just turned his head slightly, as if measuring whether or not to speak. Then softly, "I'm just tired." But I knew it wasn't just that. He leaned forward, elbows on knees, book forgotten. His eyes found mine, and for the first time, he didn't look away. The moment stretched, pulled tight between us like a thread ready to snap. I felt something inside me shift, tilt sideways. My chest tightened. I didn't know what I was feeling, but I felt it everywhere. He broke the stare first, reaching for the glass of wine beside him. He hadn't had much, just a single glass, but something about the way he held it now, delicately, like it might shatter, made it feel more than it was. I followed the shape of his hands, the curve of his fingers. I shouldn't have, but I did. The power didn't come back that night. The storm raged on, wild and constant. We stayed in the candlelight, the two of us in that soft, glowing bubble while the world outside fell apart. Eventually, he started talking, slowly, like the words had been waiting for the right moment. Not about anything big, just pieces of his life. Memories from college. A dog he used to have. A story about getting lost in Paris. His voice was lower than usual, rougher around the edges. I listened, not for the stories themselves, but for the way he told them. I found myself laughing, quietly at first. It felt strange in the silence. But he smiled then, not the small, polite smile I'd seen before, but something warmer. It changed his face, softened him. And for a moment, I saw the man beneath all the stillness. The man he didn't let people see. And maybe he saw something in me too. I don't remember who reached first. If it was his hand brushing mine as he passed the candle, or if it was me, leaning just a little closer, drawn by some unspoken current. But our fingers touched, barely, just long enough to make my pulse skip. Neither of us pulled away. I didn't dare move. I barely breathed. His eyes flicked down to where our hands met, then slowly back to mine. There was something in his expression I couldn't name. Worry, maybe, or restraint, like he was holding something back. But he didn't let go. The storm outside quieted to a dull, constant hum. Inside, it felt louder than ever. My heart beat in my throat. My skin prickled from the nearness of him. I didn't want to misread it. I didn't want to ruin whatever this was. But I couldn't ignore it anymore. The closeness. The way every part of me ached with something I didn't understand but deeply felt. He pulled his hand back first. Slowly. Carefully. Like it cost him something. "I should sleep," he said quietly, almost to himself. I nodded. I didn't trust myself to speak. He stood, stretched slightly, then gave me one last look before disappearing into the dark hallway. I stayed on the floor long after the candle burned low. And in that flickering silence, I realized something had changed. Maybe not out loud, but inside me, everything was different now. The next morning, I left the house without a word. I told myself I just needed space. Fresh air. Something other than the weight of candlelight memories and the lingering warmth of a touch that shouldn't have meant anything, but did. I wandered through the town without direction, letting my feet choose where to go. Past brick storefronts, narrow alleyways, the edge of the park where everything felt quieter than it should have. The sky was pale and washed out, like it had been drained overnight. I felt the same. I ended up by the lake on the north side of Brookpine, just a patch of water tucked behind overgrown trees and a forgotten bench. I sat there for hours, the back of my neck warm from the sun, the inside of my head too loud to think straight. What had I done? What had we done? I replayed the moment again and again. The look in Ryan's eyes, the stillness after our fingers touched, the quiet retreat up the stairs. I wanted to believe it was nothing. A fluke, a product of the storm, the wine, the dark. But part of me knew better. It wasn't imagined. It wasn't one-sided. I had seen the conflict in him, felt the tension in the space between us. And yet I ran, because staying meant admitting things I wasn't ready to admit. It was almost evening when I returned. The sun had dipped low, and the house was filled with that soft golden haze that comes right before night. I stood on the porch for a moment, staring at the door like it might open on its own, like he might be standing there, ready to speak first to tell me what I needed to hear. But the house was still. Inside, the air felt heavier than usual. The kitchen light was on. A single plate sat in the drying rack. I heard the soft murmur of a radio from upstairs, Ryan's voice nowhere to be found. I dropped my bag by the door and hesitated, then climbed the stairs, one step at a time, each creak louder than the last. His door was slightly open, the room inside dim, lit only by the fading light through the blinds. He sat at his desk, reading, glasses low on his nose, a pen in hand, papers spread before him like armor. He didn't look up when I knocked softly on the frame. "I'm back," I said, my voice too small for the weight it carried. A pause, then a nod. I figured. More silence. I stepped inside, closing the door behind me. The air shifted, grew closer somehow. "I just needed to think," I offered, though it felt hollow. He placed his pen down, slowly turned in his chair to face me, his expression unreadable. Calm, but only just. I could see the effort in his jaw, the tension behind his eyes. "I know," he said. And then after a long pause, "So did I." I didn't sit. I didn't move closer. I stood by the window, pretending the view outside mattered. "I don't know what's happening," I said. "But it's not nothing." He let out a breath. "I know." I turned to him then, finally meeting his gaze. And in it, I saw the same storm I felt in myself. Equal parts fear, longing, and restraint. "I didn't plan any of this," I said. You're not supposed to be someone I think about like this." Ryan's mouth pulled into something like a smile, but it didn't reach his eyes. "I'm not supposed to let you," he said quietly. The room went still again. My heartbeat echoed in my chest, loud and uneven. I stepped forward just once, enough to close some of the distance. "I'm not asking you for anything," I said. I just needed to say it out loud. He nodded slowly. "I appreciate that." But something in his voice cracked at the edges. "I don't want to hurt you," he added, barely above a whisper, "or confuse you more than you already are." "You're not confusing me," I said. "You're just part of the truth I didn't expect." He looked away, hands clenched loosely in his lap. For a moment, I thought that would be the end of it, that I'd walk out, and we'd never speak of it again. But then he stood, slowly, carefully, like he was walking a wire. He came to stand beside me, not too close, but close enough that I could feel the warmth of him in the air. "You've changed something," he said, "and I don't know what to do with that." I swallowed hard. "I don't either." We stood like that for what felt like forever, two people caught in a space between what was right and what was real. No one moved. No one spoke. Eventually, I turned toward the door. But before I left, I said one more thing. "I'm not sorry it happened." And when I looked back, he wasn't either. The house felt colder the next morning. Not by temperature, something else. The stillness was sharper, the way it gets when something has been said that can't be unsaid. Ryan was already gone by the time I woke. His usual mug wasn't on the counter. The hallway smelled faintly of his cologne, as if he'd passed through only moments before, and the memory of it lingered longer than it should have. I wandered the house aimlessly for a while, my fingertips grazing the backs of chairs, door frames, light switches. All the spaces he'd once touched now carried a new kind of weight. I couldn't sit still. Every room echoed with the shape of the night before, the sound of his voice, the moment his eyes met mine and didn't look away. By late afternoon, I started packing. Not because anyone had told me to. No one asked me to leave. But something in me knew this place wasn't mine to stay in. What had happened, what had been felt, was not something that could live here. Not between these walls. Not between us. I folded my clothes slowly, laying them into my bag with care, as if the way I left might matter. The room looked almost the same as it had when I arrived, and yet I felt like someone entirely different. As if the summer had carved something into me, quietly, steadily from the inside out. When I zipped the bag closed, I sat on the edge of the bed for a long time, staring at the window. The light was beginning to shift. That golden hour where everything looks softer than it really is. Outside, a car passed. A dog barked in the distance. But inside, all I could hear was the echo of what hadn't been said. Then I saw the note. Folded once, tucked beneath a coaster on the nightstand. My name on the front in his handwriting. Nothing dramatic. No speech. Just a few lines. Luke, had to go in early. Drive safe when you leave. Thank you for being here. For all of it. Ryan. I read it once. Then again, trying to find meaning between the lines. There wasn't much. And yet it said everything. He hadn't said goodbye, and maybe that was fitting. I left not long after. My bag over one shoulder, the key resting quietly on the kitchen counter. I didn't linger. Didn't check his room or wait by the window. I stepped out into the early evening light and pulled the door closed behind me. The sound was final, and yet not dramatic. Just quiet. The drive was long. The roads were mostly empty, and the sky slowly melted from gold to gray. I didn't turn on music. I didn't call anyone. I let the silence fill the space beside me like a passenger I wasn't ready to name. Over the next few weeks, I avoided talking about the summer. My parents asked if everything went okay. I nodded, told them Ryan was kind, that the house was peaceful, that it was a good place to think. They didn't ask more, and I didn't offer anything else. But in the quiet moments before sleep, in elevators on park benches, I caught myself remembering. The sound of his footsteps late at night. The way he looked at me over the rim of his glass. The warmth of his hand near mine, almost touching. The storm. The silence after. He didn't reach out. Neither did I. Maybe we were both afraid. Or maybe we both understood that what had existed in that house during those few brief weeks was never meant to leave it. It was something that happened in the pause between chapters. A moment outside of time. A mirror we both stepped into, then quietly stepped away from. But it stayed. Not as regret. Not even as a wound. But as a thread woven into the person I was becoming. There are things in life that don't need to be defined to be real. Things that happen once and never again, but shape you all the same. Ryan was one of those things. And though we never spoke again, I still think of him sometimes. When the sky turns gray before a storm, when candlelight flickers against the wall, when I catch myself noticing the sound of someone's voice more than I should. I don't miss him the way people miss someone they've lost. I miss him like the echo of a song you hear in a dream. Faint, beautiful, unfinished,